So without further ado, please take it away and let's give them a warm round of applause.
Jeez, that's so warm. Okay, this is the last talk, right, of the night here, and so I recognize that happy hour has started. The beer and wine have started to pour, and attention in this attention deficit disorder industry is at an all-time low probably after the night. But thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for sticking around for the entire time. I promise you some entertaining questions and answers if you listen, and if you don't, well, watch the YouTube or whatever. I'm Jim. I'm a managing partner at Figment Capital. We're an early stage venture fund. We focus on blockchain infrastructure, but it's not about me tonight. It's about these guys over here who are building in the industry. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how can we not talk about restaking at some point. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the opportunities and risks associated with restaking. And first, just start off by letting you guys introduce yourselves, the companies or protocols that you work at, and maybe describe it a little bit.
I can kick off. Freddie Allen, commercial growth at EigenLabs, joined EigenLabs through the acquisition of Parillo, which is going to be an institutional enterprise-focused LRT. Was business development head there, was there for a month, and then came from Coinbase, 3 years at Coinbase, leading institutional staking sales, and joined Coinbase through their acquisition of Decentralisation, where I was business development for the year before they acquired Decentralisation. So specialised in staking, angel invested in Puffer as well. So been in crypto for quite some time. EigenLayer is the marketplace for economic security, or pooled economic security, or decentralized trust, being the value at risk and the stake. It's the coordination layer between the supply and demand for that pooled economic security.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Drosera. We are a security automation layer for EVM and Ethereum applications and infrastructure. Talk a little bit more about what that means later on in the presentation, I'm sure. But before joining Drosera, I was actually at EigenLabs as the head of business, so that was the whole team for having us here today. Besides that, in this case for like 7 years, active angel investor, previously at VC as well. We're very active in the staking and restaking space, both on the personal side as well as obviously what we're doing here is an EigenLayer, ABS, and potentially easier about the restaking protocols as well. So, it's a bit about me.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike. I'm one of the founders and CEO of EtherFi. EtherFi's long-term mission is to make DeFi easy for normal people. And the way we do that is by having a suite of products, integrated products, that allow users to save, invest, and spend their crypto. Our first product was EtherFi Stake, which is a liquid restaking protocol that's now grown to over 6 billion in deposits. Our second product is EtherFi Liquid, which allows users to deploy their assets into crypto in a non-custodial way and earn rewards. And then our third product that we're launching is called EtherFi Cash, which is a crypto wallet and credit card that lets you actually spend your assets in the real world. So with these three products, we make it possible for you to never have to off-ramp again.
Awesome. So, we have like the leading restaking protocol today here. We have the largest LRT, which is liquid restaking, here. And we have a team that's building a protocol that is planning to restake the ETH. So we have a pretty good, interesting path and journey along the teams that are building within restaking in the ecosystem. So number one, I guess let's just start with the elephant in the room, which is EigenLayer. What is EigenLayer? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna ask some questions here. It might be spicy, they might not be. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Right now, EigenLayer has over $14 billion in to its protocol and node operators. There's over $1 billion restaked in Symbiotic, and there's probably some in Iraq as well. What are we supposed to do with all this economic security? Is there too much economic security available to be loaned out today?
I can kick that one off. I think crypto investors or early token holders are always going to chase the early incentives, which we've seen not just in Restaking and EigenLabs and Symbiotic, but across the crypto industry. So the big number of 14 and they're topped out at 20. This is people chasing early incentives with limited downside risk. But to your question, what are we doing with it all? I think that's a job for us, Eigen and Symbiotic, to really help grow the ABS ecosystem so they can actually put that economic security to use. So build it and they will come, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk. This isn't like a one-to-one questionnaire and answer. So like conversations, right? Like I'm curious to hear Richard, what you think. I mean, EtherFi, like you guys got to figure out what to do with all the ETH, right? Like where do we stake it? So like I'm curious, what are we going to do with all this?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, the number of points we're earning is crazy.
Oh, points.
So we're just gonna keep earning points. Yeah, look, I think as often happens in crypto, there's Armageddon outside apparently. So often happens in crypto, the market went just absolutely insane, and decided to ape into the max on the latest narrative. And the latest narrative, probably to some extent, they're almost happenstance. The market was picking up. Restaking was just a really powerful narrative, and just like everything kind of landed on that, and it just became this focal point of crypto insanity for a really wild year that it's been. And so it absolutely got ahead of itself, right? Like the reality is, and maybe Eigen can correct me, but I think it's going to take years for the market to actually catch up with anywhere close to what the hype is. Meaning, it's going to take years to build out an ABS ecosystem. These are really complex technical products that are going to take a while to integrate and get customers and start slowly generating revenue. I mean, these things take a while. So that it's fine. There's a lot of craziness, but it's going to take a while to catch up. In the meantime, what we're doing with all this TVL that we've gotten is trying to create a sort of broader utility. In our case, what that means is the suite of consumer apps that even if all it is staking, there's utility and value there. And by plugging into deploying capital in DeFi, plugging into your day-to-day life in terms of spending. There's enough utility there that all this massive capital is going to actually get used, so that over the next whatever it takes, a year, 2 years, 3 years, as the restaking services start catching up and driving revenue, we're sort of there waiting to supply security and to give users their rewards once the restaking services are online.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on that a little bit, I think that's clearly how there's going to be utility for liquid restaked assets, which is essentially just LRTs in general, is by building out a robust ecosystem, LRT5, right? While the ABS ecosystem matures, there's obviously only 10 that are live right now, not going to be. That's fine.
I think there's more entertainment outside.
No one cares about restaking risk. No, but I think obviously having a robust ecosystem that is uniquely suited to the dynamic of what an LRT is obviously very important to be able to buoy yields while the ABS ecosystem matures. Happy to talk a little bit from an ABS perspective, how we're thinking about it. We don't really actually need that much crypto economic security, so if we came online, it would be a marginal increase at absolute best for restakers. To Mike's point, clearly let's build a utility let's build a robust DeFi ecosystem around LRTs, and then there'll be an equilibrium, right? People are points chasing, people are definitely chasing incentives. Would probably be a decrease in restake, something like Moderator, but I think it'll eventually absolutely pump way, way more in the long-term future as there's 1,000 plus ABSs in the ecosystem. So yeah, echo some thoughts here.
All right, well, I mean, I'm glad that everybody's inside right now. You're forced inside. Those are great answers. And I feel like it's interesting, right? So a lot of people see the opportunity, and I think like you mentioned it, Freddie, right? Like a lot of the retail is seeing this as like yield opportunity and more yield, more passive yield. I can earn more tokens on top of my tokens. And I guess the question I have is like, is that the biggest opportunity in restaking? And what I mean by that, like, I'll go double click into that. Like, what is the big opportunity for restaking? Is it economic security, or is it decentralization? Like, what is the bigger opportunity? And like, you know, Drosera is building, you know, a protocol that is going to ideally use economic security, or going to use restaking, right? And so, like, if you wanted to give us a grade on the level of economic security and decentralization restaking has promoted, like, where do each of those land? Like, how important is decentralization, and that's what you're going for, like from 0 to 10? How important is like economic security? 0 to 10.
Okay, well, so if I were to say like out of 100 points to be allocated, for us at Drosera, I would say it's probably like 70% decentralization and 30% crypto security. And the reason why that is quite simple. Like, we're not a normal ABS. We're not. Basically, the way that we use crypto economic securities, we actually. So maybe a little background about Drosera, right? We allow protocols to build these things called traps. Traps are security infrastructure written in Solidity code. It's node operators that are actually able to perform security duties in a reactive way, a reactionary security layer to these protocols. So it's like very focused on decentralization. Centralization is like a core ethos to what it is that we do, because we're able to provide security in different ways than existing security providers are able to today. We're non-penetrator, we're completely trust minimized. It's node operators that perform these security services. So for us, decentralization is obviously like an extremely important consideration in everything that we do, and it's embedded into the ethos that we're providing to the market. So with that being said, we're actually not going to use crypto economic security to secure our protocol specifically. We're enabling protocols that use our security to opt into crypto economic security within their node operator set, or they can just use operators that just are whitelisted and there's really no crypto economic security that's preventing against polluting. So from that perspective, it really is at the end of the day a decentralization thing for us. We want to be able to open up our operator set in general over time, so we can onboard all EigenLayer operators. We're only starting with 25 at first, but obviously we want that to be in the hundreds later on, that we're uniquely enabling that, or I should say like groups like protocols like EigenLayer and other restaking protocols are enabling that for us. So I would say decentralization is like much more important when it comes to crypto economic security.
Okay, cool. And so, like, I want each of you to answer this question, because I think you all have like different opinions on it from each of your protocol's perspective. You know, there's obviously a huge opportunity. This is opportunities and risks, right? Opportunity to decentralize projects much easier and ensure that they have like sufficient economic security from day one. Awesome. At the same time, I kind of see the same 5 to 10 operators supporting, like, they have the largest amounts of ETH restaked on EigenLayer. They're like the operators of each of the major LRTs, who seem to really be like the largest sink of ETH into EigenLayer right now. So like, from a decentralization perspective, like, is this solving that problem? Is it like, is this a risk? Is this a risk? And what is the risk? And like, I see P2P at the top, I see Figment at the top, I see, you know, the same cast of characters. Like, is this decentralization? Like the conversation earlier, it was like, awesome. Is this decentralization? Like, is this the best we can do?
What did they say before?
Well, we had home stages up here. We had dap nodes up here just dropping bombs. But we also had like really great like initiatives from Lido with like CSM. There's like a lot of cool things happening in the space. Like DVT is a good example. Like ideally, like DVT is used for the operators within these like Eigen pods, right? Like I thought that was like a pure example of like being able to bring home stakers in, have them like contribute. Like it's a lot of these like I mean I have a lot of thoughts. I'm not being interviewed here or panel here, but like you know I think like the biggest opportunity, like we can look at different restaking protocols as well, like symbiotic versus EigenLayer native restaking versus non-native restaking. Like, what is the benefit to like operators that are supporting both of these ecosystems? Like, is it shitcoins only, or is it like ETH and shitcoins, or is it like shitcoins plus like actual productive protocols? Like, I don't know, but like I think it's like concern. I mean, look, we invest in Cosmos, right? We invest in Ethereum. We invest in some. And what we notice in the Cosmos ecosystem is that like 70% of like the top 7 validators are like consistently the top 7 validators, which ultimately allows for like really weird and interesting things about like atomic composability. And so there are some benefits to like having some form of centralization. I guess the question is like, what is decentralization and what are we decentralizing? And like, if Figment's running 5 nodes, like running 10,000 nodes for 5 different LRTs, like, and there's 5 operators that are doing this for each LRT, like, are there 25 operators or are there 5? And like, I think like that question like kind of gets kind of like whitewashed a little bit. And so I'm just curious from like, what is DVT the answer? Like I think for EtherFi, for example, like you guys have like committed to using Oval, right? Which is like awesome because it means that like the pie will grow, the operator set will grow, right? And so like, are we growing the pie? Like, that's the question. The question is like, are we growing the pie?
It's definitely a conversation internally at Eigen. It's notable that there is, someone could argue that there is concentration risk across operators and LRTs, but on the other hand, it is early stages. You know, we're all still growing. We've got off the ground. We've had an amazing launch, so we can grow into it and perhaps create some incentives to encourage more diversification across validated operators and LRTs.
Yeah, I kind of want to like answer the question in a little bit of a different way because I don't know like exactly like the specific. Okay, cool. Okay, so like when you take a look at all these top operators, right? The majority of their stake is from users, from restakers, right? It's not really self-stake, maybe like what, like 1%, less than 1%. So you're not actually really solving the polluting problem, right? Because these people can actually, it's not really their own stake that's getting slashed, it's users. So it's actually still like this social bond that's preventing them from polluting against each other, right? So now I'm gonna go ahead and plug DVT in a big way. You actually really need DVT to make restaking go fast, like you just do, because people can still self-slash themselves or act maliciously for whatever reasons they might want to do that. It's much harder to collude with multiple other operators to form negative actions for the detriment of whatever the protocol, the groups, the ABSs that are using restaking. So like from that perspective, it really is this thing like restaking as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like you can still be evil. Right? You can collude, you can cause detriment if you wanted to as a big node operator. But with DVT, you're actually kind of detracting from the narrative. It's no longer like promise won't be evil. It's like you really can't. I mean, maybe it's still possible, but 0.0001. A bunch of node operators, the top ones that have businesses, have investors, have economic incentives of their own, are going to perform maliciously. So, yeah, DVT and restaking seems like a decent narrative.
You can move on to a different question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do a different question. Okay, so I have one here. I have a lot of questions. Okay, yeah. So, Mike, I know it's still early. Like, you mentioned this before, right? Like, I know it's still early days for restaking. I kind of view LRT slightly different from LSTs, right? So EtherFi like originally was going to be an LST, right? And then
No, we had restaking from day one.
From day one? Okay. Good enough. Sorry, my apologies. I view LRTs slightly different than LSTs. Like, I view LRTs sort of as like yield-bearing instruments from multiple sources, whereas like for LSTs, it's kind of like I put in ETH, I get ETH, good ETH machine, right? Like broken change machine. Put in $1, I get $1.25. Like, I think one of the like risks that like the Ethereum ecosystem has been thinking about with restaking for EigenLayer was like governance risk. And I'm curious about like how does governance work? How do you guys think? I mean, I've noticed some proposals. You guys are starting to post like governance proposals, which is fucking awesome. It's awesome. So like, how do you think about governance from the perspective of like an LRT that holds a ton of ETH restake? Both from like the Ethereum perspective, but also from the EigenLayer perspective.
So I'll talk maybe about EtherFi. I mean, EigenLayer, I think, has introduced like a super interesting and I think novel governance model around intersubjective staking, which is super cool and interesting. But I'll leave that aside now. So I'll only talk about EtherFi. I mean, I think there's a bunch of things that we think about with respect to governance for the protocol. Specifically, two things that I think are very important. The first, and this is actually, I think was the very first proposal that we put out there, was about value accrual. I personally, and I guess as speaking for the protocol, believe that value accrual is very important for the governance token. The vast majority of DeFi tokens are basically meme coins with the same name as the protocol. Like they have no connection. There's usually some goofy Ponzi-nomic nonsense again that has no connection to the actual activity of the protocol. And I think that's bad. I think it makes no sense because that's one of the things that makes crypto so irrational and speculative is there's no sort of tether to reality. Whereas if you have a token with a very clear value accrual mechanism, there's you can reason about what that token might be worth beyond just what's the narrative or hype cycle it happens to be on. So our very first proposal was that a percentage up to 50% of protocol revenue is used to purchase the governance token and then LP it. And so that creates, first of all, a revenue stream or a sustainable revenue stream for the foundation, which is buying the token because it's LPing it, it's getting fees, it's accruing value. And it creates a clear tie. Like our protocol actually is generating a ton of revenue, so it continuously accrues value back to the token. So now there's a connection beyond just like voting and governance. So I think that's super important. The second thing is about risk management, and I think again EigenLayer did a really cool job with their intersubjective work token. That's it. Where you can like vote to fork the protocol if there's misbehavior, which is really cool. And I think that I said I was going to talk about. I think it's really interesting because it's meant to mitigate the challenge that was raised initially by Vitalik, among others, around overloading the social consensus of Ethereum. So this, the Eigen token is meant to sort of absorb that and serve that function so that it doesn't overload, which I think is interesting. So we're probably not going to do anything that fancy or sophisticated, but what we are going to use our token for is to help with risk management in the same way that many other governance protocols do. Like for example, Aave. When a new asset needs to be or is proposed to be listed on Aave, there's a risk assessment that's done by a contracted entity that then goes up for a proposal for a vote. There's a series of temperature check, a vote, and then finally an execution. And then the asset gets listed, usually with some parameters. And that's great. That's actually a really good model. That totally works. So that's exactly the type of model that we're going to use for listing new ADSs. So there's going to be a proposal, a risk assessment, in our case by EigenLabs, that goes up for discussion, temp check, vote, and then gets actually whitelisted within certain caps. So how much ETH can we restake, what's the overlap, etc. So that's how we're thinking about governance as far as like a risk mitigation mechanism for all this kind of gargantuan amount of ETH that we have.
Okay, no idea how we're doing on time. Neither does that guy. Okay, cool. I've got a question. Why not ask this one? Seeing a lot of different assets being restaked these days. Even in EigenLabs, I'm seeing like a lot of different derivatives of ETH being restaked. How does everybody here think about the diversity of economic security sources restaking protocols offer? Like, on the one hand, we have protocols that will accept any ERC20 token for economic security. On the other hand, EigenLabs is allowing native ETH, but also like name your LST. Name it, they accept them all. Are all ETH derivatives created equally? Should they receive the same amount of pay? Like, yeah, okay, good answer. Why? I mean, and so like regarding the types of restake ETH, like, do you have preferences or aversions based on their quality or origin? And like, how does this influence? Like, I mean, I'm curious from all of your angles, right? Because like I assume like Drosera might be like, hey, I only want this kind of ETH. I don't want that other kind of ETH. I assume like Mike, you're having conversations with like ABSs and they're like telling you that. And then I assume that like Mike, you're having conversations with EigenLabs and you're saying these guys are telling me this. Like, and so like, how do you guys think about just like the quality, perceived or otherwise, of the ETH that's being staked? Is it all one-to-one? Is it same dot? Is it all as valuable as the other stuff?
I mean, we don't like to play favorites. We just want to create an ecosystem for open innovation. So I don't want to start naming names, but that's also the power of like dual staking as well. If it comes down to an ADS native token, they can use the ADS native token with a more established, more liquid, high value token for the dual staking power for that exact reason.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, let's see. So first of all, Frederick actually had a really good post on this, I think it was on Twitter, where he talked about different types of collateral assets. And one of the, I'll try to paraphrase poorly some of the points that he made, which is, look, you want different types of restaking assets for different purposes. If you're securing a crypto bridge that primarily is transmitting, let's say, ETH or altcoins that basically trade along with ETH, then you pretty much want ETH as your security asset, because if suddenly the price of ETH moons or crashes, it's going to be proportional to the value that's being transmitted across the bridge. You actually want assets that are correlated with the thing that you're securing. Whereas if you have, I don't know, an escrow service that mainly deals with stablecoins, ETH is a terrible asset to secure that service with, because again, one day the price of ETH crashes, suddenly your economic security effectively got cut in half. So you want the right asset for the right purpose, whether it's ETH or USDC or BTC or whatever. And so I do think it makes sense to restake different different assets. Depending on the usage. When it comes to ETH specifically, yeah, 100%. This hasn't even really like entered the discussion yet, which is like the different types of ETH and even the same type of ETH provided by different LRTs will be of different quality. Because if you have one ETH that's securing 50 things, then the 51st thing using that ETH is probably going to view that as not super valuable, because your security can disappear if any of the first 50 things that are being secured blows up. So the same LRT or two different LRTs providing the same ETH, not the same, because one might be providing it one-to-one dedicated, another one might be providing like max levered ETH, and they're not the same. And then of course, to pick fairly random examples, like Fraxi is very different than like natively restaked ETH. One has like very significant DeFi and smart contract exposure. Whereas natively restaked ETH, no DeFi exposure, and I would say like relatively low smart contract risk because it doesn't actually own the smart contract. Nobody's even talking about this because there's no slashing mechanisms implemented. There's no revenue mechanisms implemented. There's no pricing mechanisms implemented around like how to value different types of ETH. So yeah, this is why I think I said earlier, like it's going to take years for this stuff to really fully mature. But yeah, right now none of this is being considered because it's just ape your ETH and earn some points. Like that's kind of the extent of it so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think these two gentlemen to my left and right are probably better suited to answer this question, but this, with respect to like how we view it as an ABS, I think ultimately we just really indexed, maybe overly so, for like working with LRTs that are known to be reputable. I'm biased towards EtherFi. I've been knowing those guys for like 2 years now. Obviously, they do really great work in the space. We have a high degree of confidence that they've thought through all the mechanisms that underpin their stability. They're going to have very strong ABS strategies. So obviously, it was like a no-brainer for us to work with EtherFi. For our crypto economic security, it's the first LRT protocol that we'll be working with. But in reality, I think we've done 4 or 5 of these like LRT borrowing economic security deals. We've done them like publicly through Twitter and whatnot, so it's no like secret or anything. I think ultimately the way that we're viewing it is we just want to work with some really good firms that are obviously giving a shit about security. We're a security protocol, we're security first. We want to be working with LRT protocols that also have security first principles. So as a result, we're just like kind of thinking through more so diversity as opposed to just like really diving into like what's really behind a lot of these assets at first. But we're kind of in a privileged position because we're not going to be in ABS immediately. When we launch, we're going to probably be 3 to 6 months just while it's the operator set, not using shared security. So there'll be a lot of maturation for us to then really figure out, okay, like who are these LRTs working with, which ABSs are they working with, do they really have a security first mindset? So that's what's absolutely most important for us. But yeah, we're in a privileged position to see how the market plays out.
Awesome. I have no idea whether we're over or under. There's not a clock in here or something. So, does anybody have any questions from the audience that they are dying to ask? Oh my God, so many hands up right now. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Big round of applause for the panelists here. Thank you guys for taking the time tonight. And have a great night.
All right, so that was our last panel of the day. Thank you all very much.